Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, those who are sitting here in Hub in Bratislava, and also those who are watching us online. Welcome to the second panel, I'm sorry. And the topic of the panel is the rise of the mobile bank only. But before we start, let me introduce our panelists. So from my right side is sitting Peter Stražovec from company Payout.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Next to him is sitting Filip Kollert from company Crypto Fintech Swipelux.
Yeah, it's Swipelux, but hello, thank you for the invitation.
And on the screen, we have Matteo Rizzi from consultation company FTS-Group. Hello. Under him is František Jungr from card company Visa. Under him, Jana Maličková from Fintech-as-a-Service. Before we started, Matteo Rizzi prepared a short presentation, so we can start with it right now.
Hi guys, my name is Matteo Rizzi. It's great to be here. Thank you, Peter, for inviting me to this conference. And I'm here to talk about the rise of the fintech hybrids. A couple of words about me. I have a weird combination of experience in between industry expertise. I worked 13 years at Swift. I co-founded something called InnoTribe, which is considered one of the pioneers of the fintech space, so pioneer that we actually launched the first startup challenge and the winner was TransferWise, but also Revolut and Mambu and Currency Cloud. All these guys were really at the beginning of their journey when they sort of come to this initiative. I left Swift in 2013, became an investor with different funds. My own fund with Russian Sberbank as a main limited partner, but also Omidyar Network that is investing in Africa in financial inclusion and tech for good startups, as well as I helped setting up a couple of corporate venture capital for large banks such as Societe Generale and Intesa Sanpaolo. The fund was called Nevafin Ventures. Lastly, I have also a startup, an ecosystem, and entrepreneurship experience because I founded something called FTS-Group, previously Fintech Stage, which is a boutique innovation consulting group that helps basically incumbents and traditional players to get smarter about fintech. A couple of context here. Everyone remembers when they were in 2008, that Tuesday when the news came out. I was at Cyprus in Vienna, I still remember, and that was the moment that everyone sort of recognizes as the start of fintech. You know, I have a presentation called The Game of Fintech Thrones, and I usually say that we awoke the dragon back then. That's the date when Lehman collapsed, and it started sort of decomposing the financial services industry in pieces where inefficiencies started to be exploited by startups. And so exploited that this is probably the most shown slide of the past 12 years, more or less. And this actually the website of Wells Fargo. You see that little red square that you see top left is the logo of one of the largest banks in America. And slowly but surely, every single word in that website was covered by startups that were, of course, exploiting the inefficiencies or the lack of agility of the bank in general, not just Wells Fargo, and came up with a solution that was geared towards competing with them. And let's shift gears a little bit now. I don't know if you have seen the movie The Founder. Is the story of Mr. Kroc that sort of took the idea from the two guys that were actually doing these burgers in an amazing way. And there is a moment in this movie where Mr. Kroc is talking to his lawyer, and the lawyer says, you think you're in the burger business, but you're actually in the real estate business. And this is the moment where McDonald's started to buy the places and lease them back to the franchisees, and the revenue and the business of McDonald's started to grow exponentially. So I want to talk about embedded finance, and embedded finance is basically a business that is incorporating financial services in the payments or credit or debit or insurance space in a seamless way, putting the customer at the center, and usually from a non-regulated place. So the example I usually give it here is the example of Booking.com, right? So this is typically a platform that used to be a travel platform that all of a sudden became a payments credit collection platform, and potentially could start lending money to their accommodation owners. And another example that we'll see later on is imagine a portal for a ride-sharing app that all of a sudden becomes a financial services platform to finance the vehicle, to collect payments, or to give a microcredit to their chauffeurs. So this is a shift that basically came from putting the institution to the center into putting the client into the center. So we are actually reaching out to the client and her data to be able to exploit and build the financial services on top. Of course, PSD2 and open banking were incredible drivers for this type of application, embedded finance, to grow. And therefore, we start having new players coming into the space that are not only either startups or fintech startups or incumbents or traditional players, but all of a sudden you have these very large corporations that have such a large history and power on their clients, and they're super credible in cross-selling new services. How big is this market? So let's start giving a little like series of numbers here. So today, if we put together the top 30 global bank and insurers, they have a market value of 3.6 trillion. By 2030, the embedded insurance, lending, and payments platforms together, they will represent twice as much. And let's sort of double click on this. So today, consumer lending typically is planned to grow close to 10 times in the next 5 years, actually 4, because we're already in 2021. But you can see that embedded insurance and payments are the markets that are growing the most, especially insurance. Why? Because insurance is the typical case where you take a set of clients that are already dealing with financial services. Insurance are already regulated, but typically what they do is they can be super easily embedded in retail and e-commerce. That's why these type of services are growing so much. And by the way, this is not just a sort of a Western economies type of play. This is an African startup. It's called Tap and Go. They are in Kigali, Rwanda, and they are basically supplying cards for buses. You basically cannot take a bus in Kigali if you don't have this card. It's like the Oyster card for London or the Octopus card for Hong Kong, if you have been there. So these guys have together over 1 million cards in Kigali alone, and that is 4 times the number of people with the bank account in the capital. So the moment that Tap and Go is given the permission to actually do payments and recharge their cards, not only to pay their buses, but also to do peer-to-peer payment or merchant payments, they become not only the largest fintech of the country, but as well the largest financial services player of the country. And this is probably the iconic example of where embedded finance can bring a corporation or a non-financial services corporation, which is Grab. So Grab started in 2012 as a ride-hailing company like Uber, but very quickly, 4 years later, they started a service called Grab Pay that basically allowed clients to pay the drivers within the app. But all of a sudden they spin off and they started indeed giving credits for vehicle leasing, microcredit to the chauffeurs, performing digital payments, doing digital pay slips, doing insurance. So all of a sudden Grab Finance spun off in 2018 and now became a unicorn. More recently, they actually sort of go a mile further in a global agreement with Singtel. So what is the monetization opportunity in embedded finance? So we basically started by sharing APIs and being able to typically use the data of the clients to build basic services on the top, on the corporate side. And then what you do is that you take a third party, typically a startup, and then you implement a service together. And the more services you implement, the more data you get. And all of a sudden, these services can start to be even more targeted to the right people. And all of a sudden, when you have an ecosystem of services as a corporate with most of your clients using one or all of them, then you can start cross-reference and leveraging services that basically are a virtuous circle, because the more your clients are using these value-added services, the more you can build. So I was asked to take 10 to 15 minutes to do this presentation. So this is just a hint. I want you to leave with the impression that there are new players that are coming into the financial services ecosystem. And also I see that the sun is going down. So slowly but surely my image is getting darker and darker and darker. But I will leave you with this last message. Always get out of your comfort zone and choose what is now the never normal, which is an expression that I love it post-pandemic. The world is not the same, and the massive rise of digital financial services that brings new player into the game is actually shifting the collaboration to a new level. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you for listening. And you know how to reach me. There is also my book in the background of this presentation. As you know, I'm a rebel, but I made peace with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matteo, for your presentation. For me, and I think for everyone, it was very impressive. I like the numbers and everything. And you were talking about a customer-centric model. And I have one question to all panelists. How should a user-friendly solution look in finance? We can maybe start with Mr. Stražovec.
Thank you. So thank you, Matteo, very much for your presentation. The last slide with Never Normal was awesome. And as Martina mentioned earlier, coming from Payout, we are looking a lot on what should be the perfect solution for our customers for payments. And I did tell it already in a few presentations, like the payments in future will be invisible. Nobody will even know they are there, the companies in between. Everybody will be able not only to pay, but to do all the financial operations, sending money, lending money, paying for whatever he needs, without even knowing that something has to happen in between. That's, for example, why we are, since last 2 years, pioneering technologies for automated financing and automated transactions, so our clients can offer these to their customers using being in the world of new normal, trying to have everything mobile first, automated, etc. And the customer, he doesn't even see what's in between. It's faster, smoother, and more secure than it was before. So that's the goal.
Thank you, Mr. Stražovec.
Yeah, so the question was how to create a simple, let's say, entry point for customers. So I think that the way how to do it is to just talk with your users and just ask if this solution or how it works is the easiest as it can be, because we did the same. I have a startup that is B2B focused, based in Estonia, and we are creating payment infrastructures for cryptocurrency companies. And I just saw that in crypto space, it's the entry point to DeFi's or to buy cryptocurrency or to use NFT is just completely insanely hard for the new coming users. So just how to do it is just talk to your users and just try out the new things. And if I can follow up on the presentation, I think that the idea of opening APIs and opening data to third parties are really important. But lots of companies are struggling with that, because if you think about it, to create some changes in banking, for example, it's really expensive. For example, the George application, I think that everybody knows that. It doesn't really work perfectly. And if bank would open their APIs, even though they open banking, they have done it, but the APIs are just terrible, as I know from my partners. You can build on top of that a really interesting technologies. So talk to your users and like open your data and invite third parties to build some interesting technologies on top of that.
So may I ask just the problem is that the API are not good created in banks.
Yeah. I think that lots of companies are just having their data for themselves. For example, LinkedIn. They are just closed source of information, even though it's your data, even though you know how much, like if you wrote someone a message, it's your data. The thing that you wrote to them is your data. And they have closed APIs that you cannot build any kind of technology on top of that. And if you would like to use some kind of, let's say, automatization for sales, which is quite popular, it's not possible because they will block your account. So I think that they should more focus on first, like making the product better, which is kind of hard for a big company because it's expensive And or the second, just like open your APIs and open your data and share it with the others, and you can also create some monetization. It's not that you will open your data and they will steal it from you. You can have a partnership that would benefit both sides. So I think that's the point.
Thank you. Matteo, the stage is yours, and the question is same. How should look user-friendly financial services?
So to start with, guys, I need to explain why, since I'm here, I did not run the presentation in person, and the reason was that I was supposed to be in Brazil, and it was like super early, so I pre-recorded it. But then, unfortunately, something happened that I couldn't make the conference out there. So, in the meantime, it was too late to arrange things differently. So that's why it's a bit weird to see yourself recorded and all of a sudden be in a panel in person. So this being said, because that would be a question that I would have asked if I would be, in the shoes of the public. Basic financial services, so the perfect access to financial services is the one that doesn't seem like one. So the more digitized are payments and financial services applications, the more they become like water or electricity. So very soon, no one will be willing to do anything to pay something, right? It should be an experience that goes, that is like a gesture of every day. Now, this is obviously not going to be possible for all financial services, but the truth is that with the smart treatment and the richness of the data that we are exchanging every day with our behavior and with our, with the non-structured data that we produce every day, very soon, the machines and the non-physical experience would be actually the largest part of our interaction with finance. That's my consideration.
Thank you very much. You mentioned the data, and for example, today banks have a lot of data, but when we look on some banks' product, they are not customer-centric. And do you see that there is exactly the opportunity, let's say, for some partnership with fintechs? It's question on you. No.
Is that for me, Martina? This is the name of the game. You just mentioned the very reason why there are over 50 fintech ecosystems in 50 different countries in the planet. And also the reason why all the banks started by sharing startups and 10 years later, they are all collaborating because they finally realized that they can't beat sort of third parties collaboration by trying to do things themselves. And this is true, is becoming, it is now a no-brainer, this collaboration effect. In some cases, there is a little bit of still the not invented here syndrome, as we say, but I see very little success stories when large institutions try to do things themselves. Marcus, the credit platform in the UK from Goldman, I think is probably the exception. I think it's Goldman.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Jungr, the question on you, same like for other panelists. How should look customer-centric, user-friendly financial service?
So I'm probably in in between what my colleagues were actually saying, obviously we aspire to have a seamless payments and something which happens in the background invisibly, and that's probably as good UX as it can get. But for me, being in the payments for many years, this is still something which will take years to happen. And we need to take in consideration, not everybody is tech savvy, not everybody is digital savvy, etc. So obviously fintechs are established in that space and they are being very active in that space, and they are aspiring, as well as Visa eventually is aspiring, to have a seamless payments happening in the background. And with some types of payment, this is already happening. But for some types of payments, actually, people are not ready. Consumers are not ready for seamless payments. They want the control, uh, as much control as some paying with cash, and as much control as some people actually having additional control mechanisms before they make the payment itself. So maybe that's just a short reflection on kind of having a totally seamless payments, which probably sometimes in the future definitely will happen. In some industries and some consumer groups, it will happen much faster than with the others, but then we will have the long tail, which will actually take years before we get to something as extreme as kind of a seamless payment happening. But for me, the user friendliness comes from the UX. And the UX, by that I don't just mean having a seamless payment. It's about a UX which fits into the group which I am focusing at. So if I'm a fintech, if I'm a startup and I'm focusing on millennials, I'm focusing on digital savvy customers, etc., obviously it's all about making it seamless, making it happening background, having a very simplified way of doing things, kind of complicating functionalities simplified, which I think fintech have made in the last years very good progress in, something which traditional banks haven't been able to progress as quickly. And we as a Visa, we stand somewhere in between. We cooperate with traditional banks, so those are traditional clients, and we cooperate with fintechs on other side. So often we try to make this bridge between leaping too far away and bringing up new technologies, but also staying on the ground, making sure that the UX is there, the experience is great, but at the same time we need to not to forget about security and all that related to payments and payments infrastructure overall. So I think it's about finding the right balance between the extremely easy UX, but also still feeling secure on the other side, which for some consumer groups like millennials might be much more towards the UX and the convenience, and for some more traditional clients it might be still more on the kind of security side, being sure that it's them making the payment, they are aware of making the payments, etc.
Thank you very much. And now Mrs. Malachková, the questions is same. How should look user-friendly, customer-centric financial service?
It's always relative to the users themselves and who they are, as it has already been said. So I would make it very short. It's about the pure research and retesting, and you really need to know who your customers are, and then you build the product for them based on what they say.
Thank you very much. In your answers, I heard a lot of many times were mentioned data. And I'd like to ask you how you work with data in your company.
Starting
To
again.
Mrs. Yes, you start, Mr. Stražovec.
With data, we work as any other regulated from whatever points of view, GDPR, banking regulation, or other companies. We use the data as much as we can. We secure them as much as we can. And if we don't need them, we delete them. So it's tough. It's tough working with data from all the security perspectives. Whenever we need to involve third parties, like Filip mentioned, that it has to be a way how to open data, but still it has to remain as secure as possible. So we are utilizing data first for security of the transactions itself. Second, for evaluating financial aspects, cost optimization, etc. And last but not least, for all the benefits for clients themselves, to be able to bring them better user experience, better transactional experience.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask you, we were talking before the conference started that about how difficult it's for you to, let's say, change something instead of when it's bank is doing. Do you think that it's easier also for you, like for small fintech, to work with data than bank, which has a lot of data, much more than fintechs have, but they don't work with them so effectively like fintech do?
I wouldn't necessarily name that they don't work so effectively as we do. We have much more narrow focus. We focus on only fractional parts of operations compared to a bank who has dozens of products, etc. So we are able to go deeper in and being faster in the terms of either using data or evolved things. On the other hand, bank has significantly more data than we do, so they can elaborate on much better statistics or usage of the data. So it has two sides. For us, we could be faster, and usually we are. On the other hand, if we need to know more, then it's more tough problem for us than for a bank who has much more information about clients or about whole ecosystem of transactions in given territory.
Thank you so much. Mr. Kollert, I'd like to ask you, because your fintech is crypto fintech, and the work with data is probably different than in classical payment fintech. How do you work with data, and also how do you comply with the regulation?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the way how we did it is that we have developed a tool how to buy cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin with traditional finances like Euro, GBP, Czech crown, and you can buy it with your credit card. So it is like the easiest way how to buy cryptocurrency these days. So we solved one problem, but and by the way, regarding the regulations, we chose Estonia to be licensed there because let's say that the regulations are there a lot better. So regarding the data, the thing that we did is that we have opened our APIs to any kind of company to use our tool because users really liked it. So we said, okay, let's try to make a business on it. So now we changed the focus to B2B when the widget can be integrated into crypto exchanges, cryptocurrency wallets, DeFi projects, and etc. etc. And but still the data, I would like to follow up on the question. Like if you would like to do the same approach as we did, the security is #1 key priority, and this is also like where we are or where I am pushing our developers that the security is the biggest and most important thing. But as I got the feedback from our partners, it's amazing that they didn't have to develop this kind of tool by themselves because it's costly. There are lots of, let's say, frauds. We take care of all of that, and we just take care of all the things that they would have to do. And yeah, so it works, but security is important.
Thank you so much. Matteo Rizzi, I have on you a bit different question because your FTS Group is a consultation company, and I'd like to ask you, when you work with fintechs and banks and other financial companies, where are they struggling the most in the work with data, or in which field they are not effective?
So the answer is actually different according to which stakeholder we're talking about, because of course startups are built on data, especially the ones that are, as I was saying in the presentation, exploiting the inefficiencies of larger financial institutions, typically in the credit space, for example, to use an environment that everyone understands. So basically, the opportunity on one side, so to be like a data crunching native, being able to experiment and to be very agile in a way that basically data talk to the application, are actually the difficulties on the other side, where the amount of data is incredibly large. But at the same time, it's not because you hire like 20 data scientists that you can all of a sudden make a sense out of it. Why? Because on one side there are these legacy systems, so just to extract the data and be able to make some sense out of them is already a challenge. But also because there are dependencies, from resources inside large organizations that make things not easy. So on the other hand, the easiness for a large financial institutions in dealing with data is that once they reach a proper internal organization, and now I don't know if you have seen it, but there are companies like, I don't know, HPE or NVIDIA. They actually made the collaboration. For example, I'm mentioning it because I happen to talk about this in my podcast, and they were saying that many companies now, they need a sort of philosophy about the data approach, and almost if part of the initial work that is necessary to make sense of AI and data, because data themselves are actually the raw material, right? Then is the intelligence that you apply on top that makes the difference in terms of how effective is the application going to be, or the business service. And they were saying that their challenge is actually that IT infrastructure and developers very often are two very different entities. So the research, data scientist part needs to talk with the infrastructure CIO. Is the CIO versus CTO, and sometimes there are like ownership problem in large organizations, which is of course the opportunity in this case for the small startups where these type of silos are non-existent.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jungr, I'd like to ask also you how you work in Visa with data, because Visa is, of course, one of the biggest fintech in the world. So what's your approach?
I'm glad you are putting us in the fintech category. We are not always associated with that, even that we believe that definitely part of what we do is very much in the fintech space. You're right. I think who knows Visa knows that we process and through our systems an enormous amount of data goes every day. In the peaks, actually, we have 65,000 transactions a second coming through the system. And obviously, then it's a lot of responsibility, and it's also a lot of security. How do we actually keep the data? How do we secure the data? But most importantly, how do we eventually use the data so it's again safe and secure for everybody? So we work with the data quite extensively. We use with the data a majority of the cases in aggregated and anonymized state. But because of the amount of data we have, we can actually derive many trends and kind of sayings on what will happen and what is happening. So the data are very much important for us, and I very much support what Matteo said. It's not about the data you have; it's about how do you work with this data. And in recent years, Visa have developed so-called data science centers across the globe. We have one locally in Warsaw as well, which supports Central and Eastern Europe, which exactly has this clear purpose: is to how do we actually translate all the data we have in some usable information. And just a couple of things, how we are using the data as a Visa. So by looking at the data, we can obviously help our clients issuers, banks, to set up the products more accurately, to target the right audience, to based on the behavior of a certain group, we can say what the needs for such a product should be. We can advise merchants where they should open new store, because we see where the traffic goes and where there is a lot of shopping in certain segments and sectors. But we also help governments to monitor trends, for example, during the COVID. So what was happening during the, when the COVID have started, how the transaction and the behavior have shifted from the face-to-face environment into e-commerce environment. So those are just few examples how the data can be used, but everything which we do, we are basing on data.
So if I understand well, Visa is not anymore just payment company, but you are also doing consultation services based on your data from the payments.
Exactly as you are saying, I think many people still sees us as a pure payment company, or some even say credit card company. But since, I would say last decade, we are much more than that. And we have become active in many areas where general consumers or even our clients didn't see us, 10, 15 years ago. And this is exactly, it's about using the data, to a certain extent monetizing the data as well, but using the data responsibly with our clients as it needed, providing consultancy services, and again, not just in the payment industry, but in the kind of finance or banking industry overall, using the data. I think we have much more to offer and much more to solve with having millions, billions of transactions in our systems, which we can utilize to make actually the right decision. So yes, you are right. We definitely shifted from being a pure payment company providing rails for payments in general to company which operates in many sectors, including consulting, including data, and being, I think, very active in the fintech space as well, working with fintechs very closely.
Mr. Stražovec?
If I may add a little bit on this, what František, Mr. Jungr said, this is a very good example of what you have been asking earlier versus banks and their data. Because as us, as Payout, being an emerging leader in AML security for transactions in Central and Eastern Europe, we have a deep insight into the merchants, into the ecosystem of what our clients are doing. But on the other hand, we rely a lot on Visa and their data, because they have the broad idea of not only the card, the tokens, and all the information. And it's only the cooperation between Visa as an acquirer and as a platform, as a company, and their data, and us to provide a full scope security. So this is already happening, what you have been asking earlier.
Thank you very much. If everyone, any other from panelists wanna say something, just ask for the word. So now a question for Jana Malečková. They're working with data is almost core business of everything. And I have a question on you. When you are taking data from banks for your clients mostly, where are you struggling the most when you are connecting to API of banks?
If I should talk about the data in relation to fintechs, I would maybe point out that it's the first time in the history when we as a regulated party are very much dependent on the quality of the PSD2 API data that banks are providing to us. So it's important to say that, however, we would like to be as much innovative as we can be based on our research. It always is about the quality of the data that we get from the banks. And yes, you are right that data across Europe that we get from the banks have really different quality. And I would maybe talk about three groups of banks that we currently see in Europe. So the first group of banks is the group which still denies PSD2, and their APIs are not compliant with the law. Then the second group, those are the banks that already accept, either voluntarily or they might be forced by the regulators. And the third group of the banks are already searching for the opportunities. And if we have to talk about data quality, we also have to mention that it's also on the shoulders of the regulators. And here I would also divide regulators into three different groups, like those who, let's say, still are not aware of their new role when the PSD2 has come into full force in September 2019. Then there are regulators that already are active, they are willing to communicate, they know what, or they are trying to find out the ways how to grasp this new role. And the third group of regulators are those who are already doing some oversight processes because they receive the reports on PSD2 obstacles that fintechs have reported to them. And we've been in 16 countries so far. We have the contact with 16 countries. So I can say, if you would like to get maybe some more details, I would say that, so you were saying where we are struggling the most, it's the Czech Republic, where the banks, where we found out the most PSD2 obstacles, and we have reported them to the regulator, but we don't see any reaction, any communication. Whereas on the other markets, we even have the results where the obstacles were removed, or the oversight process is started and it's in the process. So you see that regulators are active. So we are really dependent on the banks and the regulations.
Thank you very much. You mentioned Czech Republic, and now we are in Slovakia. So I'd like to ask you about Slovakia regulator, because you have also the license from Slovakia. So maybe you can tell your experiences.
Yeah. So the National Bank of Slovakia has the fintech team. I find people there very active. They are willing to talk, discuss, and are themselves proactively, they are proactively already doing the oversight, and they recently created or included the technical skills in the team. So it's not just about the legal skills, but also technical. It's very important once you have the fintech on the call that is speaking very technical language, and on the other side there are only legal people. So we really appreciate that we see they incorporated this technical knowledge in the team. We see in Romania it's happening the same, or in Belgium as well. So I think Slovakia is a good place to be regulated, and the things are moving forward.
Very much. Mr. Kollert, I have a question on you. You have applied for license in Estonia. Why in Estonia?
Yeah. I have asked the same question to our partners, like when we talked about how we are building the architecture of banks and financial institutions in our system. I just simply asked them what they would like to do from our company. We had several options. We had option in Czech Republic, Slovakia, UK, Lithuania, Malta, and Estonia. So after some research, we have managed to came to conclusion that Estonia will be the best place because it allows us to work with a number of banking partners. We are just under a microscope of regulations where the regulators are just very strict, which is like a good thing to have when you have banking partners. And maybe if I can just add one thing, I would like to ask Jana, based on the thing that you said before. You said that your solution is linked to the quality of the data that bank is providing to you, and that there are three types of let's say, approaches. So how are you solving the issue if someone don't want to open their data or they don't want to make some adjustments? Do you talk to them, or like are you just saying, okay, if you don't want to do this, bye bye, I will go to some other party?
First, we talk with the support team of the banks. There are banks that are very active, and even in Slovakia, I remember 3 banks that were able to remove the obstacle within 1 week or sometimes 2 weeks if it was more difficult. But we also have cases in which the banks do not want to cooperate, and in that case, you only have the possibility to talk to the regulator. Of course, the regulator always is asking about how was the communication with the bank so far. So we file those communications to have the proof that we were trying really hard to explain and to came to the conclusion. And in this case, then I see Slovak regulator, National Bank of Slovakia, that I see there are ongoing, it's like 2 way of communications, that they first talk to us to understand the problem, then they talk to the banks, and even they organize the communication, or they ask the banks to organize the calls with us so we can again talk and come to the consensus. But if the consensus is not coming out of the discussion, then we just close it and say the regulator has to decide. We see this approach also with other regulators in Europe, but if I should be talking about the case in Czech Republic, for example, very specific, there are banks that are refusing PSD2, or they are not, or refusing to repair the obstacles that we have reported. But on the other hand, also the regulator is not very communicative. They say that they are not allowed to talk to us, or they are not allowed to inform us about the process. And so it's been already a couple months since we've been in this process. We were advised to contact the Czech Banking Association, for example. I don't really understand why we should talk to this association, because they even told us that we don't have a license, which is not true. We transported the license to all EEA countries, and still it's been 4 months and we still don't have any contact point in the Czech Republic. So this is the problem, that once, if the PSD2 framework is not set in the local regulatory institution, then it's becoming a problem, because we really don't have a higher instance to go somewhere to make a complaint, because European Central Bank is oversighting the central banks. But if the national bank has a problem, we don't have anybody to talk to. So this is a problem that should be really discussed on the European level, how these things can be solved. And also, it's always important to remember that once there is a discussion or dispute about some obstacle, it's always the people it's always about the people, how they translate or how they explain the situation. And as we know, people do make mistakes, and we haven't had this situation, but at the moment there are currently there are some oversight processes going on, and I'm just a bit afraid that if the national regulators do not have enough skills to to translate all these EBA opinions that have been published for the different kind of obstacles, if the local regulator doesn't have enough skills to assess it properly, it can happen that the decisions might be made wrong. And what in that case? can we go to a higher institution to, it's similar with the court. Like, if you have a problem, you go to the court, and then you have other instances to, maybe try to come to the correct decision.
Thank you very much, Jana. Peter Stražovec, want to answer?
If I may build a little bit on what Jana described and on your question. For us, as if I consider Finas or Payout as vivid actively fintech companies who try to deliver to our clients as soon as possible. Like our delivery to market, time to delivery is very short compared to bank. And it's true that if there are countries like Czech, for example, we need either to fold it, to answer your question, or to find a business way how to bypass it to satisfy our customers. The regulatory wouldn't help, and at least, I don't know how for Finas, but for Payout, doing talk with regulatory who is not responding is so long that we wouldn't resolve the thing. But we can see in European Central Bank this being touched as a major topic, because if many of you are involved in central bank digital currencies, where it's a big question of what should be the role of banks if central bank would issue the currencies, and especially few forums on European level are touching the topic of PSD2, that many countries, the national banks or the banks there, don't apply it correctly, and they should be skipped. So they are reflecting this, so it would move.
I would just maybe add that, thanks for explanation and for answering the question. That's something that I really don't understand, because the reason why they should do it, at least from my perspective, is that it brings a lot of money, lots of business. Lots of companies can go to this country where they have open PSD2, and as Matteo said, the market is incredibly big. So that's, for example, the reason why we have moved from Czech Republic to Estonia, and we are doing business there and not in Czech Republic. So yeah, maybe this is so that a huge problem that maybe someone should do something about it. So once again, thank you a lot.
I have a question to Matteo Rizzi. I would like to ask you, you mentioned that fintech is really rapidly evolving, but do you think, according to your previous speakers, like now, they mentioned that the regulators make some obstacles and problems. Do you think that this is what slows a bit fintech evolution, the regulation, the wrong attitude of regulators?
No, I think it's an excuse. I do sort of follow the regulators' conversation since probably 2009, when they were completely sort of caught by surprise by this amount of innovation coming. And of course, you have to think that the fintech ecosystem rapidly evolved in all directions, So, and all of a sudden, you needed new regulation for capital markets, identity, usage of data, customer onboarding, GDPR, and then all the application that went on the top of it, and then open banking. I think that regulators in general, they have done an excellent work in trying to cope, because it is always easy to blame them. But I think that blaming the regulation for being slow on putting obstacles, it was in part a way to mask the inefficiency or the slowness in adapting on the bank and more like traditional player side. I think that the what you say, so the regulator being sort of not collaborating too much, is maybe more truth in emerging markets. And I do invest in emerging markets since 2015. with the Omidyar network, and then we collaborated with the Gates Foundation, and now with Bamboo Capital. So there are a few ecosystems that that I can say I know decently well, and it is true that the regulators need to be educated, and sometimes they sort of take advantage of the fact that again, in some emerging markets, banks have all interest of this innovation evolution being slow, because they are still in a unlike Europe, they are still in a sort of in a position of strength. But in general, now there is a recipe to make any ecosystem work, and this ecosystem learn from each other, and there are ways to make regulators talk with startup and banks and the technological players that now that we talk about embedded finance, there are even new players that will need to follow or not into the regulation, as well as the whole like a DeFi space that opens up a Pandora's box in terms of just think of the fiscal repercussions, on being able to fund anything anywhere, which is the promise of DeFi. So yeah, I think that it is always has to be taken as an opportunity rather than an excuse to being slower than possible.
Thank you very much. I just like to mention that our attendees can ask via Slido. We have no question yet, so if you want to ask something, don't hesitate. I have another question for our speakers, for our panelists. I love the example with Booking.com, which Matteo mentioned in his presentations. Do you think, and maybe it's for all panelists, your opinion, that the future of fintech will be in kind of collaboration between fintech, between banks, and between the companies from non-financial environment? You can start.
I actually love the slide of Matteo describing either booking or the taxi versus paying a car for the driver, etc. Because this is exactly what is happening during the last couple of few years, not necessarily related to COVID or whatever, but the huge automation growing and the requirements on the market, not only to be able to rent a flat, to have a platform for lending houses, but also to provide their shopping, like you come there, you have some shopping there, flowers, whatever, which implicates additional payments. And in past, it was done over phone. You asked for flowers or bottle of champagne to be waiting in your hotel room or in your Airbnb. Nowadays, you can check it somewhere in the checkbox and it's delivered as a service. And still, in many cases, it's paid automatically afterwards. That the merchant is receiving the money, but then he's executing it manually. And this is what was happening during a couple of past years, that this part is also automated. The money flow follows the business flow. So whenever it is automated from the client, from the customer towards the one who is offering the service or product, also the money is further transferred automatically. Services are paid instantly. Partners are paid instantly, additional services are added as a value for the customer and paid instantly. And thanks to the tools that either Payout or many other fintech companies provide, this is happening now. So I think these are good examples, and it is what is happening on the market.
Thank you very much. For you, Mr. Kollert, it's the same question, but one added question. What's the role of crypto in this financial evolution?
Yeah, so as I see the banking in the future, I think that, let's say in the 10 years, it will be just the backbone of the financial system, and the front end and financial instruments will be done by fintechs because they can better reflect the user needs. But to the question of cryptocurrency, of course, I'm in crypto space for 6 years, so I kind of believe that it will be part of the future. But first, maybe I would like to start with in the beginning, it was just an experiment. This was the reason why Bitcoin has started, and now, yeah, it seems that it's becoming popular more and more. So I think that it shows that alternatives like overcome the biggest issue with cross-border payments. Like if you want to send money to third countries, it can take up to 6 days. You can pay more than 15-16%. It's not that efficient. So with cryptocurrencies, you can do it like instantly with no human power to do so. With transparency, you can see the total volume, the total depth. You can see lots of things. And I think that the most interesting thing right now in the cryptocurrency space regarding the fintechs is the DeFi. It's the decentralized finance, which is like financial instruments built, let's say, in a cryptocurrency ecosystem. And I think that let's look at the numbers. Like in year 2020, the volume of the DeFi was around 600 million. In the January this year, it was around 20 billion, and today it's around, I think, $300 billion. So like I see that it's becoming the trend, but I don't know if this will overcome or overtake the financials. But I think that lots of companies can take an inspiration from this, and I think that there will be some kind of collaboration between banks and or maybe central banks and DeFi's. So let's see. But it is true that it's becoming, I guess, a trend.
May I just ask, you mentioned those huge big numbers. How much do you think is really in project, and how much do you think is an investment in crypto?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, like 600 or 300 billions are in DeFi's, but of course, like the majority is just an investment. And like people are going into cryptocurrency just because like they saw it in the news that it's going up, and they want to be part of the big, let's say, they just want to make money because other people are saying that, yeah, in 1 month I have made 30%. But still, there is a part of people that are using this as a tool, how to lend money, how to borrow money, how to have some kind of annual profit from the money that they have. But I think that the reason why there is not so many use cases is that because the entry point to cryptocurrency space is really, really hard. If I would, you can consider like easy entry point to some kind of new technology when some small kid can do it. Or like, let's say my brother that is 8 years old, he wouldn't be able to buy anything on DeFi because it's just completely like insanely hard. So, and this was the reason why we have created the company, because I think that there can be lots of use cases that can, let's say, be an inspiration for banks and can show how an alternative can work. So we have developed a entry point to this world that is incredibly easy, and my brother can use it. So yeah.
There is zero question about crypto future. Every central bank, European central bank, Riksbank, which is the oldest central bank in Sweden, each of them has crypto, either DeFi or either central bank digital currency on their pipeline. They are working with it. So it will happen. Just this question how it would be. If it will be central bank, DeFi, mix, we will see.
Thank you. Matteo Rizzi, I'd like to ask you, you mentioned in your presentation this example with Kigali. It's in Africa, but where do you see the opportunities in Europe? Because still in Africa is much more unbanked population than in Europe, where financial services work quite well and we don't struggling with sending money and etc.
The challenge of financial inclusion is something that is absolutely relevant for Europe as well. Only you need to talk about financial literacy instead of financial inclusion. Even if until 3 years ago, there were 2 million people without a bank account in the UK, and there is still a decent portion of population without bank account. The fact of having, purely digital banks with free accounts, of course, helped a lot. But is not because you have a bank account that you are financially savvy or financially included. There are, of course, cultural differences, and the fact that in Europe you can say that someone is not financially included if he doesn't have a bank account. This is absolutely not true in emerging markets, because you have mobile wallet, you have plenty of ways to be digitally financially included without having a bank account. So since you ask what is the opportunity or the challenge for Europe, is actually financial literacy. So is the fact that, of course, large financial institutions on one side are focusing on between the mass affluent and the affluent clients, because these are the ones that are sort of bringing revenues. On the other hand, there is this rush to get the maximum number of clients on the digital banks, the neobank, as you can call it. But once they have a critical mass, then they will start by monetizing these clients, because at the moment, market cap might be amazing, but the path to profitability is still unclear. And I think that being financially included with the lens of financial literacy is being able to have an approach to money, savings, credits, that actually it is sustainable. This is where the opportunity is, and is everyone's job to bring that literacy into Western economies, where, of course, the possibilities and the way to reach the clients is much easier, of course, because channels are there, because there is no rural areas. Think of a country like Mozambique. Mozambique is like 60 million people, 80% living in rural area, insurance penetration less than 1%. So this challenge is completely different from any European country, where the context is completely different. And yet you might have a very big coverage in terms of who has a bank account, whether or not is with like a traditional or a neobank, but still there is a decent portion of population that don't know how to manage their finance, and that leads to the same consequence of or the same problems or issues than people in emerging markets, because at the end of the day they become non-financiable or very little financiable, therefore with a minor possibility to with a less important possibility to grow.
Very much. Maybe I would be interested about the answer on this question from Mr. Jungr, because Visa is also a multinational company. So maybe where you see those opportunities in Europe.
So looking at it from two angles. One is the borrowing part, and I think this is very important, because we have seen a kind of an increase of interest of, I would say, traditional banks on the fact that the many fintechs have been activated in this space. Klarna, Charge After, there are many of them in this kind of now pay laters, who have created very more need for deep diving into this topic on its own. And here we see the totally different approach from the traditional kind of banks, which usually have quite a robust and conservative risk departments, some less, some more. They have legacy systems which are difficult to upgrade, and few other things which are kind of them to move more or differently into the space of buy now, pay later. Another one might be a credit card with negative options on at the same time offering the same functionality as the fintechs loans currently are offering. So I think where the opportunity is actually working between the fintechs who have actually makes us and less conservative risk appetite. They also have a possibility to be more aggressive when it comes to upgrading their systems and providing some high-tech solutions. So I see that there is an opportunity for the fintechs to provide the backends and backbone solutions to the traditional banks. But the challenge will be how the risk appetite of the traditional players will be willing to accept it. I think that's kind of something to still tackle, and I think this will definitely be something which will slow down the development going to the future.
Thank you very much. I have the last question for all panelists. COVID changed really a lot of customer behavior, also the customer experience. So I ask everyone for 30 seconds answer. Where do you see the biggest opportunities according to current circumstances and current customer experience and expectations in the financial industry? Let's start with Petr Stražovec and all speakers.
30 seconds, you say.
30 seconds.
COVID was big change for small ones. They needed smooth service, remote service, not coming to open an account, not coming to sign, everything remote and everything flawless. And for corporates, on the other hand, the new normal in working with their teams and with their clients, again, implicated a requirement for new set of tools, new set of products, which FinTech was glad to provide. This is our experience growing during 2020 to 2021 from hundreds of thousands monthly of transactions to tens of millions monthly because of the demand for new products. So it is here and it's us to satisfy it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kollert.
Yeah, so I think that like COVID boosted the things that the people are doing at home. So I think that everybody now should focus on making, for example, the UX UI really, really simple so the users can do everything simply from their homes. So that's it, I guess, from me. Like in cryptocurrency space, of course, it boosted a lot, but like we are still the same community without any changes because of the COVID, I would say.
Thank you very much. Matteo Rizzi?
For me, it is really about the opportunity that the mental digital leap of the large population will make some of the verticals, in financial services that are still very little digitized, will make the innovation, an accelerated innovation possible. I'm thinking, for example, in the PropTech space or real estate space, adjacent to fintech, the asset tokenization. So before people were hesitant, when such a big, critical, sort of financially important business, to deal with it in a non-in-person environment. I think that there will be a lot of new opportunities that this digital leapfrog in terms of mentality of the population COVID has brought.
Mr. Jungr?
I think I would partly echo what the other panelists have said. So I think what actually COVID did in a positive terms, they made everybody move towards the digital environment. And even some of that might disappear after the COVID will stop dominating our space. A lot will stay. And this is often an area which is occupied by the fintechs. So fintechs are definitely benefiting from this boosted digital trend which COVID have brought. But I would also say that the traditional banks have made a big step forward and they became more digital savvy, and many of them have improved the way how they work with digitally, how they work with clients, and it was partly out of the necessity, partly sometimes a little bit late, but it was something very much needed. And they have, maybe there was a big space before, big gap. Now the gap is in many area much smaller than it was actually before. So this is for me kind of the increasing opportunity and the importance of the digital space, which will stay here after COVID. And it will just we will just see how the fintech and traditional banks will continue to kind of occupy the space. And if the gap between the fintech and traditional bank will again widen, as it was on many occasions in the past, or because of the COVID the gap will actually become much smaller, and therefore many of the fintechs will have a more let's say appetite to cooperate with traditional banking.
Thank you very much. And Jana Máčková?
I think COVID was a good opportunity for the fintechs that have already made enough to go to the market. But I really believe that the real driver of the open banking, or let's say PSD2 in Europe, is political. I believe that European Commission or European Union decided to adopt PSD2 and GDPR because it needs to solve its own problem, and it's related to the fact that Europe is highly dependent on foreign payment providers. 80% of the retail payments in Europe are processed by 2 foreign payment institutions. We've been talking about the data. They are processed in different jurisdictions, and it brings a lot of geopolitical risks for Europe. One is that it costs Europe a lot. Retailers have to really pay a lot of money that are money ranged to the other continents. Another thing is our laws like GDPR cannot be enforced because these payments institutions are in different jurisdictions where the different laws are valid. And last but not least, in fact, it's the other jurisdictions that control the payment flows in Europe. And I think this is the main driver on the political level. And it should go down from the ministerial level to really to the end users, to all European citizens, to understand the situation and take it as a geopolitical risk. So this is my
Thank you very much. Thanks all our panelists. Thank you all attendees, and I wish you great rest of the conference.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.